here we go. Good morning. Welcome to Sundays with Doug. Thanks for joining us as we come alongside of you, as we have all embarked on this journey where we're rewiring a brain, building new habits, and creating a new identity. Because 100-Fold is about a group of people who are on a journey to find their true identity and life purpose. And yes, you do have the power to choose. You have the ability to choose. And in fact, today's session, we're going to be talking about the chooser. What is our chooser in life? So looking forward to talking that through with you. As we always do, we talk about the 10 truths. These truths were true for Jesus, and Jesus is our example of the way that life is supposed to be lived, which is always in the right place at the right time. Everything his hand touched prospered. And because those truths were true for him, they're also true for us. So I ask that each week you memorize, apply, and meditate upon these truths. And with that said, for those that are online, who would like to share maybe an event this last week where one of these 10 truths appeared?
I will.
Okay.
I would like to share that God has granted me favor in the sight of those around me. I've really been embracing friendship and being appreciative of it, and little signs have been coming towards me, and it's great. I feel, you know, like a friend of mine just stopped by and shoveled my walk 3 days in a row.
Wow. Look at that.
And it was just, I didn't ask him to. He just came by, and I thought, wow, that's just a nice sign that, that I'm embracing and loving people around me, those around me, and God has granted me favor. And so it sometimes might be just little things like that, but I'm just being appreciative. I mean, God is just showing me his, appreciation through people. And so I'm also in a state of rest. I just am not stressing about anything. I'm just resting and just embracing that rest and knowing that all my needs are met,
Yes.
so.
Even in this situation, you didn't even ask, right?
Right.
So this person, out of the kindness of their heart, because God has granted you favor in the sight of those around you, without you even asking, he decided to do that for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a beautiful thing.
Mhm.
Thanks for sharing that. So the next two slides are just kind of review, but what we're doing is we're defining the soul and exactly what that means. And I've shared this each of the studies. We're a triune being. We're three in one, and I think you might have heard that. God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, right? Three in one. It's a mystery. We don't quite understand it, but we know that that is true. And just like that, we are also a triune being. I am a spirit, I am a soul, and I have a body. So the spirit was before the foundation of the world. Again, this is a mystery. Somehow I was holy, and Ephesians 1 says I was holy and blameless before the foundation of the world. So somewhere along the line, we all were a spirit. And I kind of, my belief is that we are God, meaning like the ocean, you take a drop out of the ocean and put it into a glass. Is the drop of water any less than the ocean? So I believe that God is within us, his spirit and our spirit um, mingle and are one. And so we're one with the Spirit, one with the Lord. We're seated in heavenly places. And the purpose of the Spirit is to govern the soul. Okay. And then a soul, this is what God has breathed his breath of life, and we became a living soul. You can find that in Genesis, but it's our will. That's our chooser. And it resides here. Our emotions and our actions reside in the soul. And you could even use the word ego, and that word gets bounced around quite a bit, but it's who we are, right? I am a soul, and my soul's name is Doug, and I live in this body. And by the way, the soul governs the body. So it's a top down, if you will. So the body, this is what was made from the dust of the ground. It's God's dwelling place. This is where he resides. He resides in me. And these are where our five physical senses are, right? And it's external input, everything that's out here. So this is where God is experiencing a life, a Doug life through me, as me, with me, for me. The way I like to phrase it is like Avatar, if you remember the movie Avatar, where there was a body that this guy named Soli entered into, and he became um, the Avatar. And I forgot the guy's name, the big blue guy, but he was experiencing um, his life through that body, the Avatar. So again, I'm a spirit who is a soul who lives in a body. That's who I am. Now, what does that look like? It looks like this when it's in perfect harmony. This is your true identity. And the statement over there, I don't think you can read the fully, but when you know your true identity, it'll change the way you act, the way you think, and the way you feel. When we realize and agree and know that this is who I am, and then that also comes with rest. And if you haven't seen the video where we go into detail in this picture as well as several others, go to the one last week, knowing your identity. And that's a very powerful message, because when we know that, then again, it changes the way we approach life. It's no longer I have to do in order to be who I already am. It's resting in knowing who I am. And then life just comes together. It's a beautiful thing. All right, so let's start kind of going into a little bit of detail, defining your soul. So just as a reminder, I am a spirit. I am one with Christ. I have a soul, and the way to maybe kind of think of it is there's three different elements inside the soul. It's how you think, how you act, and how you feel. Right? It's where our mind is. And the beautiful thing is that, as our last study we did, we have the mind of Christ. We have the mind of Christ. So we have the mind that can control the will and control the emotions, right? And then who lives in a body. So kind of think of it in this way. I just found this helpful to be able to kind of visualize that even though there's three, right? Spirit, soul, and body. Inside the soul, there's a triune being as well, if you will. It's what we think about, how we act, and how we feel. And what's important is that we need to be living from the inside out, meaning, as I described in the previous slide, it's the spirit that governs the soul, which governs the body. And that's called living from the inside out. And when we understand that, it's like the bride. She's living from the knowing of her identity, of who she is, and it comes from the inside out. Versus the other way, which, quite honestly, I was living this way for many, many years. Even in my Christian life, I was living from the outside in, which meant that the body was governing the soul, which to some degree stifled the spirit, right? I wasn't able to hear it. I wasn't able to respond to it, because I was driven by the body, the five physical senses. I don't care what the Bible says. I don't care what people say about who I am. look at the circumstances around me, look at all of this, and that started to govern the way I thought, acted, and felt. So that's living from the outside in. So you can see how what governs what. All right, so before I go on to the next slide, is this kind of making some sense?
Yeah, yeah, it's really good.
All right. So really, the slide is kind of weird, but it's the way my mind was thinking. Is as I'm thinking, acting, and feeling, and when Doug, and I'll use the word Doug or my ego, I need to make sure that I'm bouncing my thoughts and my actions and the way I feel through the spirit, which then controls the body. And so it's governing it correctly. So you see the direction it's going. I'm not making the decision based on what the body feels, what those five physical senses are, but what the spirit says. So back to that picture with the bride, the bride knows who she is, and every time a negative thought or negative circumstance, what we view as negative, we bounce it off of the spirit who reminds us who we are. No, you're well taken care of. Those are the 10 truths. All your needs are constantly met. So you bounce that off of that, and then that controls the body and basically says, I don't care what you see. Life is good. We're okay. So here's a quote of a book that I just read. It's called Transfigured. Um, a gentleman named Tommy Miller. It's our responsibility to have dominion over our souls so that we can come to Jesus and find rest, because most of our souls are in constant turmoil. And when our soul is in continual turmoil, we experience a lack of health and prosperity, because we, as human beings, are governed from the inside out. Our biology reflects our thought process. Okay? So it's our responsibility to govern our souls, which governs the body. And we're taking direction, if you will, from the spirit. So this is, again, another picture. This is the way my mind works. So here's our soul, right? Mind, will, emotions, the way we think, act, and feel. So our mind is, we have the mind of Christ. So we have the ability to think the thoughts of God. And then our emotions are when we feel that we're loved and completely accepted. Um, there's no condemnation. Our emotions are that of love and joy. And in fact, the fruits of the spirit, or the consciousness chart, um, where it talks about the different levels of consciousness, and one of them, the highest one, is enlightenment, and then you have joy and peace and love, and then down at the bottom is fear, anxiety, anger, frustration. So when our emotions are driven by the spirit, it's love and above. It's living from that love and peace. But our will in the middle is even more, because right, we're defining what the soul is, and it comes down to those three entities. But then even part or driven further is our will basically tells us which direction we're going to go, right? So it's our chooser. So it's our will. All right, Doug, what is the will of Doug? How are you going to respond to these thoughts and to these emotions? And then you go in the direction that you're being driven to, right? So that's our chooser. It goes all the way down from our soul down to the will, based on our thoughts and our emotions. All right. So I started with this slide at the introduction back a couple of videos ago, and this is talking about rest for our soul. And if you notice the picture there, so there's the two oxen, and one is the spirit, because Jesus in this teaching said that I will take my yoke upon you and I will give you rest. I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you'll find rest for your soul. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. So the Spirit is God, and we are yoked with God's Spirit, and we're being driven or guided by the Spirit. And according to what Jesus says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So all we're doing is just following, and I'll use the term breadcrumb trail, and he's guiding us and directing us every step of the way. But what they are doing is they're pulling the body, pulled by soul and spirit. So the little arrow there is kind of like the body is attached and the body is just kind of coming along for the ride, if you will. And what's beautiful, the beautiful thing is the way that we experience this life is through the body, through our physical senses. We get to enjoy the smells and the sights and the sounds and the tastes. So it's not a bad thing that we have a body, because of those five physical senses. They're here to enjoy this life even more. But what we tend to do is we look at the negative instead of the positive, and it brings us down. So again, what are we being governed by? We're being governed by the spirit, which governs the soul, which then governs the body, and basically pulled along for the ride. Let's enjoy the ride. All right, so now I'm going to be asking some questions here as we go on to this next slide. So think of the soul like a teeter-totter, if you will, right? And the soul is deciding which direction to be pulled from. So notice the body is on the high side and the spirit is on the low side, right? So that is living from the body versus the spirit. And the soul is deciding that they're going to listen to the body rather than the spirit. So the question for you online is, how is this life lived? What kind of experiences will you have when your life is governed this way? So how would you answer that?
Can you hear me?
Okay, there we go. Go ahead.
I think you would be kind of having some anxiety, maybe a little bit of fear, trying to control things, which direction, or like if you're not being able to pay your bills, maybe you're trying to figure out how to pay your bills and you're not, and you're having anxiety or fear, and but one of the 10 truths is that all my needs are always supplied. So it's believing in the unknown, that things are always working out in your favor.
Mhm. Yes, exactly. So you're governed by the body, by the circumstances, by the situations, by that bill that shows up, by how your body feels, by how the government is being run, the world conditions, even some people, the weather, right? It's going to be raining tomorrow, life is miserable. So yeah, that's how it's lived. And then there's this teeter-totter where it kind of rocks between body and spirit, where they're kind of equal. So how is that lived? How would you define that?
Mm. Um, I guess where maybe you're just thinking, not quite having enough faith and just resting. Maybe you're still not planting enough seeds, or maybe not believing, you know, fully trusting. Um,
Yeah,
just
and this is where I lived for many, many years, is teeter-tottering between the two, right? It would be up, down, up, down, up, down, right? And um, there was no consistency. And so even though this looks like it's pretty even, it's like, hey, what's wrong with that? At least it's not, off-centered. But that for me was very difficult because I kept on trying my best to to please both, if you will.
Mhm.
Um, and it caused a lot of anxiety and ultimately burnout. And then we've got this one. So how is this life lived? How would you describe this one?
Well, you're not trying.
Yes.
You're just resting, and
Yes.
you've put your requests out there to the universe or your prayers, and you know what you want, but you just believe that, yeah, God is taking care of you. You're
Yep.
just resting. You're not fearing, and there's peace in you. So it's part of those fruits of the spirit where you feel rested, love, joy, and peace, and you know that all your needs are always met, and your state of being is at rest.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. And that's what I call the hundredfold. So notice there's 30, 60, and a hundredfold. And the 30 is driven by the body, the five physical senses. The 60 again is that balance. And that one we're begging God, we're pleading with God, we're confessing to God, we're saying, why isn't life better? Hundredfold, as you just pointed out, I think that's the perfect word, is it's rest. And it's coming from a state of knowing who we are, right? So so what do you think keeps us here if we're being driven by the body? What keeps us here? Why aren't we being pulled by the spirit?
We're not fully connected. We're not fully trusting. We're not fully believing. And a lot of that might be just your state of mind of not letting go,
Hmm.
letting go and just rest and have peace.
Yeah.
Not being connected to source, to God, whoever you call it, but it's just being really, as Abraham Hicks would say, tuned in, tapped
Yeah.
on, turned on, or something like that. It is.
Turned in, tapped in, no, turned on, tapped in, tuned in, turned on, tapped in. That's something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah, yeah,
something
yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you feel really good too. It's like your your spirit is really moving you. You're allowing.
Yeah. 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 And I think I know for me, was just letting go and knowing that I'm fully accepted and loved and that my needs will be met. Um, because coming from the 30 and even the 60 fold is I was coming from a place of not truly understanding my identity, that I had to do things in order to be pleasing to God. I had to confess my sins. I felt that I was a dirty, rotten sinner. So why would I trust and let go and not be fearful and move out of the body into the spirit when I knew that, God was the judge up there, and so it was fear based, right? Similar to what kept me here was just that fear of not letting go and just bouncing between the two. It wasn't all body, it wasn't all spirit, but just bouncing between the two. So my light bulb picture kind of describes it: on off, hot cold, hot cold, hot cold. Or as I also describe it, as a roller coaster, you're kind of up and hey, life is good, and then something happens and you go down. It's just a roller coaster. Whereas hundredfold, it's it's you understand the ride or the journey that you're on. And even though it may feel like there's highs and lows, you see them for what they are. So it smooths things out. Not saying that there's not a roller coaster where there's highs and lows. Of course, that's just life. But we're able to understand where they're coming from and why they're coming. It's not because, you blew it. It's to cause you to grow and allow you to grow. So what do you think keeps us here where the spirit rules versus the body rules? What keeps us here in this place?
Well, I think it's important that we know who we are. And wisdom is really important. It's like knowing the truth. You have to know who you are. You have to know the truth of who you are. And you do need to get connected to spirit. Well, what is the truth and what is the wisdom and what is the identity of the spirit? And just knowing that. And once you accept that and you allow that, then you can rest, and it's like you're at rest, you're at
Yeah.
peace, you're connected. And the emotions that we have, they kind of guide us, if we're feeling fearful or if we're restricting. It's almost like your feelings are telling you where you're going, what rabbit hole you're going down.
Yes.
And you can, that emotional guidance system that you talked about in your videos, that's God gave us that so
That's
that
right.
we could stay tuned in, tapped on. you know it's because we get off that wrong station, or
Yep.
that we're the station isn't coming in very clear, and that just our emotional guidance system is telling us that, okay, you're getting out of tune.
Mhm.
You need to recall, know who you are, and then you'll stay in that frequency, or that on that station.
Yep. Yeah, I love that. I love that. And you're exactly right. It's that guidance system, and it's there for a reason. So we have to listen to it, right? We have to have our mind of Christ on so that we can hear all of those messages. Because everything is here to support us, whether we believe that or not. It's here to support us. It's not to work against us. It's for us.
Mm. Yeah.
All right. So just again, my visual from a couple of weeks ago, when we have the mind of Christ, that's the power source. That's what lights the light. And our soul is that connector. And when we're tuned in, turned on, and tapped in, turned on. All right, I can't remember it, but when that connector is tapped in, then our body, which is the manifestation, will light up. So this means that I am heaven on earth. I'm the dwelling place of God. This is who I am. And we talked about the tabernacle, and this is the Holy of Holies. This is the meeting place of God, back as the example of the Old Testament. Um, so this is who we are. We are heaven on earth. We get to experience this life, and enjoy this life. When we're listening to that spirit, when we're being governed by the spirit, that brings heaven to earth. And then the last slide is as we've talked about quite a bit, it brings rest. It's not something you do. Rest comes out of knowing who you already are.
Yeah, that's good. You have to know.
You have to know. You have to know. And what ends up happening is life's circumstances. For example, the neighbor that did your driveway for 3 days in a row, right? That was because God granted you favor in the sight of those around you. So there's a little bit of knowing now. Your knowing has increased, right? And
Mm-hmm.
in that case, it may be been a little bit, maybe a lot of it, but as life comes to us and we start to see these things and seeing it from a place of gratitude, then our knowing, our knower, grows and grows until we get to the point where, you know, you're doing crazy things. Maybe crazy is not the right word, but adventurous things. You're making, you know, choices out of a state of knowing rather than a state of fear. And then life becomes, you know, a static of synchronicities. It's just exciting,
Mm.
but it all comes from rest.
Mhm.
All right. Well, thanks for jumping on. Thanks for your great responses, and appreciate your time. And thank you everybody for joining the Hundredfold. And please continue to work on these 10 truths. And we will talk more about rest for your soul next week. So that's it for this morning. Bye for now.
Bye.